All right, let us talk now to the former Strikeforce and UFC Women's Bantamweight champion, the one who made news last week. She's coming back. Yes, after years of asking her if she would come back, we finally got that answer. She is, in fact, coming back in July against Marion Reneau. She is the one and only Miesha Tate, who's kind enough to join us. Miesha, great to talk to you again. How are you? And congratulations on the big announcement.
Thank you. I'm over the moon. I'm very excited. I'm great. I'm better than great.
Okay, so I'd love to talk because we've talked a few times since your retirement in 2016, and you always ask, "Oh, do you have the itch? Do you miss it? All that stuff." When did you first kind of notice that you were starting to think about coming back?
I would say it had to be right around the time that I had my son. So that was be about 9 months ago. And it was just a combination of things, right? It was the fact of, the pandemic, I think actually had a lot to do with it. I think the forced slowdown again, where I had to sit back and kind of understand again, reevaluate as I think people did around the world, like what is really important. Family is important, time is important, dreams are important. And there's only so much time we get, with each one of those things. And boiling it back down to basics, really, I was pregnant and I was like, the borders closed, the gym shut down, I couldn't train. And I just really realized right then how much I missed it, how much I missed all of that. And I think having it all taken away, I mean, to the point where I had like none of it. We couldn't
Mhm.
grapple. I mean, Singapore is extremely strict, right? No grappling, even the pools closed, all the gyms closed. That kind of like having it all taken away from me made me sit back and realize like how much I really love it. And it also kind of lit a fire for me to want to get out from that space into a better space. And that just made me want to, I don't know, it just made me want to compete again.
So at the time that this is all going down, you're still in Singapore working for one championship.
Right.
Your husband's over there as well. Husband or partner? I want to get that right.
He is my partner.
Your
Yeah.
partner. Okay.
Yeah.
When do you move? Because you're in Las Vegas now, right?
Yep.
So when do you move to the United States?
So I moved back in September. So I had my son in June, but I knew I wanted to fight like in June. I knew that I wanted to fight again. And then moved back by September. That was also part of the reason why I wanted to come back, right? Because I wanted to be able to train. I wanted to see what I could do. Um, so my goal was to fight, but obviously there was a ton of moving parts with that. Well, that was my goal, but I knew that I had to balance a lot more things in my life. And also, let's just see, like physically, if I was even like on that level still, right? I mean, there was a lot of questions I had to answer just for myself. I mean, just saying you want to fight or knowing you want
Mhm.
to fight is not enough. Like I had to prove to myself first that I was still capable of that, that the sport hadn't passed me by, that I wasn't, that I hadn't just lost it all, lost the step, So I came back and I worked my way back into it and sparring with some of the very best at extreme and training and grappling and wrestling and doing all those things and getting the feedback from my teammates, like when somebody walks up to me like after a practice and they're like, Miesha, it's like you never left. And they're not even knowing I'm going to fight again, but they're just like giving me that kind of feedback. It's like, it's good, that's where I wanted to be. And then I was like, okay, I'm on track for this. Like this goal, this dream of mine is not so far fetched. Like I could definitely do this. And those questions were answered very quickly. And now I have a great support system as well. So I feel like this will be the first time in my career where I don't have a ton of detractors, taken away from a lot of the things that I believe I could have done, in that first run of my career.
And when you say detractors, do you mean internally, like on your team or outside?
I mean, well, really both. It was mostly my personal life, to be honest. Like, my relationship with my ex, who I know is no secret, but not to be namely. Like, he's a good guy at the end of the day. I wish nothing bad for him. I want him to be happy and all those things. I just am very glad that he's not a part of my life moving forward in this, because there were just so many things that didn't benefit me mentally and emotionally
Mhm.
to really be the very best version of myself. You have to give everything to this sport. You have to give as much as you can, and you have something taken away from it, something that's, mentally and emotionally exhausting you. There comes a point where you just have nothing left. And that's where I found myself with Raquel. I just wasn't able to engage in that fight the way that I wanted to. And that was very depressing. It was really depressing. I was struggling mentally and emotionally, and I was in a very dark place. And I needed to take time away. I needed to take time away from everything. I needed to separate myself from all the things that were taking away from myself, and answer questions and get out of that dark space. So I did that.
Did you know in your heart going into that fight, win or lose, that would be your last fight?
No, not at all. Not at all. It really wasn't until the fight happened. And because, there had been so many, I mean, every fight before that, I'll be honest with you, because I was in that relationship from the very beginning, from the very, very beginning. So at like my very first amateur fight, every fight I went into, there was always so much taking away from me. There was always so much taken away from me mentally and emotionally, but I always was able to just turn it on anyways, to turn it on. Like I would always just be like, it doesn't matter that you're tired now, Miesha. It doesn't matter that you've been crying for the past 2 days. It doesn't matter that you're depressed. It doesn't matter. You still have to show up and do and be the best. And it just got to a point where after years and years and years of dealing with that and it getting worse and worse and worse, that the bad really started to outweigh the good. And now, he was a great coach and gave me great skill sets and great things, but there was no separation between the coach and the home life. It was like the coach always came home with me, and it was a constant braid, and there was the fights and the arguments and the emotional, just not having his understanding, which you think, he would, being having been a fighter himself. But so I think where I was going with that is, it was every fight I was always able to turn it on anyways, despite of, in fact of, facing the adversity. And it just finally came to a breaking point where I just could not handle it anymore. I was just imploding, and I was caving in on myself, and I felt like something had to give. And that's what it was. It was my relationship with the sport. And mind you, we were separated before my last fight. I know some people, because I wasn't very clear on, my personal life and even taking the time away, but we were separated like almost immediately after the Amanda fight. And then,
Okay.
and then I was just like, again, just in a pretty depressed place. But when I say separated too, there was still contact, because we tried to do just the coaching and, being separate otherwise, but he didn't want it that way, obviously. So there was constant pressure of like wanting more, wanting the relationship to be rekindled. And I just didn't want that. And that was very ugly.
Wow. And recently news came out regarding an ATV. Do you want to speak about that? This kind of just came out of nowhere, where he was charged with 4 felonies in a 2018 case involving an alleged theft of an ATV, which I believe you owned.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's my vehicle, and this was other things that have transpired since then. And I just feel like, look, let me just say this: no matter how much I gave in that relationship, no matter how much I gave to him in the separation, mind you, I gave him 2 houses, like 2 houses free and clear up in Washington State, house for him to live in, and a house that was with renters. No matter how much I gave, Ariel, it was never enough. And that is the storyline of our relationship. I give and give and give. And I'm not a perfect person, and I'm not trying to, play that, I'm just perfect in every area. But there came a point where I was like, enough is enough. I am tired of this. I'm not under your thumb anymore. I'm not manipulated by you anymore. I'm not controlled by you anymore. And I'm strong enough to stand up for myself and what is rightfully mine. And this is where I draw the line in the sand. And when I draw the line in the sand, like, that's it. Like, I can be a very stubborn person, right? And I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I didn't do any, and there's a reason why I don't have the felonies, and I don't, because I'm not like trying to, I don't mean to break the law, and I'm not trying to do all these things and be, but what's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong. So I'll just put it that way. And yeah, it was it was a pretty ugly little battle there for a little while. But again, I don't wish anything bad for him. I want him to just be happy. I just want him to leave me alone, and yeah, and be a good person.
Is he leaving you alone? No contact?
Basically, yeah, basically, yeah, he hasn't contacted me directly. There's been some mutual friends that have maybe tried to pass messages along. I think he's obviously concerned about the seriousness now that he realizes, because I was such a pushover before in a relationship, like whatever he wanted, whatever this, that, if he wanted to, take the money that I made and buy an RV, buy a razor. And that's really where it came in, is like, I would make the money, I would fight, I would have all the pressure, and then the benefits were always reaped that way. So, there were things that I never would have purchased for myself, but he was like, oh, let's, I want to get this, I want to get that, I want to da da da. Okay, sure, like, no problem. And I'm not mad about that either. I've definitely enjoyed, having the other things or whatever, the RVs and things, but it was always a manipulation, I felt like, to his benefit. And the fact that I paid for those things is just like, no, I'm sorry. I know that you feel like that somehow that you have a right to these as well, but we were not married. I did pay for it. And that's it. Like, I don't know, like, maybe you negotiated a deal. Okay, I'll give you a percentage in hindsight, even though that wasn't an agreement. I'll give you 10% for that. Thank you, Brian. But it was just never, no, I want half, or I want to split, or I want to sell this, or it was just never, it's never enough, and it's just exhausting. So no, that's really where where it kind of stands, if that answers your question, so to speak.
Yeah.
And yeah.
When you walked out of that cage in New York in 2016, Madison Square Garden, did you think in your mind, I need to fix some things in my personal life and eventually I'll come back? Because you were still so young. Like, you're only 34 now. We're talking 5 years ago, you were still so young. Did you think, okay, if I fix some things, obviously a lot easier said than done, but I'll be back here one day? Or did you think in your mind, that's it, I'm done, I'm never fighting again?
At that time, I was pretty convinced I was done. I was sincere about the retirement. Let's just say that. However, I always kept that in my mind. I never closed the door, like slammed it, like I adamantly will never come back. But I really believed that that was enough, that I had had enough. I'd been doing it long enough, and I wanted to know more about myself. Like, what, Miesha Tate, the fighter, and what else? I mean, because that's this kind of a scary transition, right? A lot of people make that too late in their life and they don't have anything else to jump to. And so I thought, you know what, I'm almost 30. I want to know Miesha Tate, the what? Now I'm Miesha Tate, the vice president of one championship, right? I'm Miesha Tate, the Fox analyst. I'm Miesha Tate, the commentator. I'm Miesha Tate, the mother. I'm Miesha Tate, and now going through a fighter again, so I've answered a lot of questions and given I have no concern about, what's next in my life, what those next chapters can offer. I've already kind of went through that over the past 4.5 years, and it's been a beautiful process. I've learned a ton about myself. I feel like a much more whole person, a much more stable person, a much happier person. And these are all things that I feel like will really benefit me when I can go into my next fight and just have that kind of clarity. It's just something I never had before.
And so you mentioned the role with One. You've been around the fight game for the last few years, working with One Championship over in Asia. When you were considering coming back, why didn't you go back to One? Why didn't you fight with One? Or did you have to go back to the UFC considering your contract?
Yeah, I had to go back to the UFC. I had
Okay.
to, because I left mid contract, or not even mid, I re-signed when I fought Amanda, fought the championship, excuse me, I'm sorry. I re-signed when I beat Holly, signed the championship agreement, right? Which obviously locked me into more fights that I did not complete. So, rightfully so. If I owe anybody those fights, I owe the UFC those fights.
Okay. So you didn't even consider, some people like Rumble Johnson recently got let go when he came back. Did you consider asking them for a release, or did you want to go back to the UFC?
Well, I put it this way. I asked about a grappling match under the One Championship banner, and the answer was no. So that kind of solidified that. I'm like, well, okay, obviously they're not going to allow that. They're probably not going to allow, anything more than that. But, it's fair enough, because the UFC is really what made my brand relevant and popular, and, where people care about it, right? They elevated my brand. I worked hard. I fought, did a lot of the right things, but, without the UFC, I don't think people would care very much about Miesha Tate. So I think it's okay that, that they still have a stake in the claim, stake in the claim, a stake in the game, whatever I'm trying to say here. I think you understand, right? That they, they have those rights, and I'm happy to fulfill them.
I get what you're saying, and I'm not trying to stir the pot. I do disagree with you. I think people cared about Miesha Tate and Strikeforce as well. You could say maybe they elevated and they brought, new eyeballs, but you were very relevant and very popular pre-UFC. So I wouldn't sell yourself short on that. At what point do you reach out to them and say, I'm ready to come back? When did that happen?
Before I even moved back to the US. So
Oh, wow.
probably, so I had my son in June, and probably by July or August, I reached out to Dana, and like, honestly, he blew off like my first 5 DMs. I DM'd him on Instagram because he didn't have WhatsApp, right? And I was over there and I couldn't text him. Well, maybe I could have, but I had an Android. I wanted to know if he saw it or not, right? That control thing. I want to know if he read it. So like, that's why I went through Instagram. So I was like, if you can see it. And he would like read my message and just not respond.
What?
Yeah, like he read my message and I was like, hey Dana, I was like, I want to fight again. I was like, not sure exactly my contract, this, that, and they're like, nothing, like no response. Finally, I was like, I'm just gonna text him then, because maybe, I don't know, maybe someone else is running his page and just checking his DMs and he's not seeing it. Okay, so I make sure I have the right number, send him a text, no response. I'm like, the hell? Okay, I was like, okay. So then I started kind of lose it. I started to go off on him a little bit on Instagram. I was like, I was like, I will find you. I know the PI is. I'm gonna come to your office, and and I started to get frustrated. And then finally he responded finally with, come home. That was how he responded, come home. And I think because I obviously, before I made that move in the jump, right, you want to know you have a tree to jump to. So I guess my thing was like, do I have a place with you? Do you still want me to fight? Like, if I'm going to make this commitment, that means potentially leaving one championship, moving back to Singapore. Do you have a place? And when he said come home, that was enough reassurance that was a yes in my mind. So I just took that, and I went home, and I met up with him in September, I think it was, right after I moved back, and just kind of sat down. He's like, so what are you doing here? I was like, what do you mean am I doing here? I was like, I want to fight. And he's like, I think he wanted to make sure I wasn't in a place where I was desperate. I think he wanted to make sure that I wasn't like doing this for money or because I had to, or some other reason that would be other than being passionate. But I was like, no, I was like, I really want to fight. I was like, 145 or 135. He's like, I'm leaning towards 145. And that's what I said too. I was like, I'm thinking 45s just so I don't have to cut weight, right? He's like, well, 45 is a rematch with Amanda. And I was like, so is 35.
That's right.
Either way, I'm going to get there, so it's Amanda at the end of the day, regardless. So he's like, okay, I'm probably thinking 45. And then it was like, months went by, and obviously the 45-pound division seemed to, I don't know exactly what's going on with that, but I just kind of I just decided, look, there's like 2 girls besides Amanda. I think there's Felicia Spencer and Danielle Wolf. So I want options, and I want to stay busy. I don't want to be left hanging in a division that doesn't have fights for me enough to keep me busy anyway. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll go back down to 135 and work my way up there. So that's kind of the conclusion I came to.
And so if you met in September, why is it taking so long for you to fight? Like, why is your fight July 17th? Why not sooner?
To be honest, I still needed to get myself in really good shape.
Okay.
Right. And prove that I can do that, because there's talking and then there's doing. So I had my son in June, so mid-June. So it was July, August, September. So it's like 3 months postpartum. Right. So it was still I still have a lot. I was like, let me come back to you. Let me show you. Let me just make sure but I want to vocalize. I want to make sure that this is and have you understand that this is what I want to do. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start training. I'm going to see if I can check all these things off the checkbox. And I'm going to come back to Dana and be like, look, I'm in good shape. Sparring's going great. All these things are good. Everything's going the right way. I didn't want to make an announcement and get everybody's hopes up and not be able to do it. Because that was realistic, right? So that I may not, physically, maybe my body wasn't where. I still had tons of things to answer, but I knew in my mind, this is what I want. I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. But before I put the pressure on, before I get everybody excited, before I do all these things, let me make sure that I'm, I can make this, this transition successfully. And so far, like everything went really well. And I was thinking actually June, I wanted to fight in June, but getting back down to 135, just want to make sure I do everything right. I have more on my plate this time. I have 2 small children, one who I'm still breastfeeding. He's only 9 months old.
Wow.
And, so like, there's a lot, like I'm a full-time mommy and I'm a full-time fighter. And that's really what has all my focus. But, so I wanted to make sure like I breastfeed at least for a year. That is like number one most important thing to me. So my son will be a year in June. So if I stop after that, anytime after that, probably when I go into quarantine, actually is probably, I would imagine when that transition will stop.
That's wild. What timing there, how it all aligns.
Yeah.
How much of a say did you have in the opponent, Marion Renaud?
You know what? I didn't really want to pick my opponent because I didn't want to seem like, that, you know what I mean? I didn't want to do that. Like I told him I was interested in Yana, to be honest. I was like, well, what about Yana? Because I thought, look, she's 5, she's ranked number 5. She's been winning fights. She's doing really well. And, so I just asked, I was like, I'm curious, like I think she'd be a really fun fight and she's really good. She's got fun striking. She likes to fight. She doesn't run away. She can do, so I did ask about that, but I did not bring up Marion Renaud. That's not a name that came across my way. But, when they said, that time wise and the fact that she was on her retirement, they asked me like, would you be okay with that? And I'm like, yeah. I was like, of course, that would be fine. So then they went and asked her. And then it was like the next morning it was out. Like, wow. I didn't even know she had accepted actually until like the news broke. So it happened really, really fast. I was a little bit blindsided by it too, to be honest.
But here you are, fighting July 17th against Marion Renaud. It's funny, you're coming out of retirement. She is going to retire. And in your mind, how many fights till you get back to Amanda? How have you mapped this out? Because obviously, as you just said, that's the goal, right? To get that rematch.
Exactly.
How many? I mean, let's be honest. 135 is pretty shallow right now. You're all of a sudden now the second most famous person in the division. Your old friend Juliana Pena looks like she wants a crack at Amanda, but other than that, there's not that many new faces left for her to fight. In your mind, how many more fights before you get back to her?
I think this sounds crazy, but I think it could be as little as 2 wins.
I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah, I think 2 solid wins. Like if I have really good performances and I win, I do well. I could see Amanda being my 3rd fight. I could see a year from now, to be honest. I could see like July, the International Fight Week. I could see that. I could see I could see more. Obviously, I would say between 2 and 3, but I think this littlest would be 2. But we'll get, there's a lot of ground to cover before I get to that point. Of course, I've got to stay really focused on Marion Renaud because, she could spoil your night real fast. And she's a really good fighter. She's very solid, but people look at that and there's a lot of pressure on me, believe it or not, because I think people expect me to win that fight. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, but I would think that at least my expectation is right. I have to. There's no other way that I get to a title. I have to win that fight. And she's lost her last 4, but I don't look at it like she lost her last 4 because it was so close. Like those fights were very close. And then she has like a submission over Sarah McMahon. She hurt her in the striking department. She submitted Jessica Andrade, who's incredibly difficult to finish. I mean, and she's never been finished. So her losses are always very closely contested. So she's much better probably than people are seeing on paper. And that's always a little bit scary when you take on somebody who other people they just look at like, oh, she sucks. She lost to us. I'm like, no, she doesn't. She really doesn't suck. She definitely does not suck. She's a really good fighter. And so I know there's a, big challenge for me, but I also think I have to have a really good performance as well. So I do have that in the back of my mind. Like this first step is very important. So I just can't look too far ahead. Of course, I have my long-term goals. I do want to fight for the belts again. I do want to be a champion again, but none of that is possible if I don't, I look at it that way, that it's not possible if I don't win this fight and do a good job.
Do you have time for just a couple more?
Sure.
Okay. So are you done with one? I'm assuming yes.
So I put my 30 days in. So I think we have, somewhere in that 25 days left with
Okay.
one championship. So I still am with them, and I want to give them a shout out because they're doing something really cool on TNT. Have you seen that, Ariel?
Yes, the lineup is great. Starting
Yeah,
next week.
exactly. Next Wednesday. So that'll be prime time on TNT. We're going to have DJ on there, Demetrius Johnson, obviously, Eddie Alvarez, Sage Northcutt's going to be on there, and some of One Championship's biggest stars. So if you aren't familiar with those, get familiar. Rodtangjit Wangnan is an animal. Have you seen that guy fight? Do you know who
Yes,
that?
I've seen. Yes, of course. And I love what they're
Yeah,
doing. It's 10 p.m. Eastern, right after AEW wrestling on Wednesday nights on
exactly.
TNT. So hopefully a lot of the wrestling fans stick around. But, typically here in the States, as you know, they're on Friday morning here very
Yeah,
early. This is prime
yeah,
time. So I think it'll be great for them.
yeah. And it's really cool because I think Rodtang fights on there, but it's Muay Thai with 4-ounce MMA gloves. So it's like the best, most brutal part of striking, and the strikers you can take and then put them in a fight with MMA gloves. And always gets me out of my seat because they're just insane. Muay Thai is like the most brutal, scariest sport. Way scarier than MMA.
Yeah, especially with 4-ounce
Yeah.
gloves on. Are you surprised at how good Amanda has become?
Oh man, I'll tell you what. When I fought Amanda, we didn't know that Amanda was the Amanda
Right.
that we know now, right? It started with me, and she really showed that. And then she fought Ronda, and she crushed it. And she fought Cyborg, and she crushed it. And she's continued to. So I mean, I remember watching Amanda fight in Invicta, Strike Force, and she was always a good fighter, a solid fighter, but I don't think I ever would have picked her to be the GOAT at that time. So I guess sure, like she surprised me. Now the expectation we understand, and I think that's what's different about the first time I fought her, right? We didn't know that she had a right hand from hell. Like we didn't know that. She never really did that. I mean, she got smoked by Kat Zingano pretty much. And just like, it's you just learn so much when you get that experience with her, and just to be able to see everything that she has done since then. I'm very proud of her. I think she's done a great job carrying the torch for women in this sport. But I mean, we didn't know that then. We didn't know the Amanda then that we know now, and so that adds a lot of perspective in a potential rematch.
Will you be training at Extreme Couture for this? They're obviously in the news these days with Francis, and it was good to see you shout him out on Instagram as well, Eric Nixick and company. It's great to see them still thriving in the sport. Will you be there for this camp?
That's where I'm at. Yep, that's my home. I don't ever plan to leave it. I love it there. It's an amazing gym with an amazing family of fighters, and yeah, it's home for me.
And lastly, Miesha, I would imagine a lot of young women would view you, and even males as well. You're an inspiration for many reasons. Now being a mom and fighting and coming back and everything that you're juggling, but also when you speak about where you were at in 2016 and in a dark place and a relationship that wasn't going well, and it's very hard to walk away from that because you were together for so long. Can you describe like the Miesha that I'm talking to now compared to the Miesha Tate that was in Madison Square Garden, how much happier you are and how different you are? Like I could even tell off this call right here, like us, looking at a screen, I could tell that you're kind of illuminating when speaking about your family and being a mom and all that and where you are in your life. And if you had advice to people who are struggling and who want to break free but can't break free, what would you say to them?
Man, it's tough because every situation obviously is a bit it's individual. Depression, mental illness, these are things that I think people struggle with on an individual basis, and there's certainly not a one size fits all solution. But what I can say about myself and my personal experience was that I was really empty. I had given everything I had to give, and I felt like there was no way through. Like there was no, like I had to step back in a way, and I had to cut ties with pretty much everything. And I had to just go inside, in myself and reflect, ask myself those difficult questions. Why do I feel this way? How can I fix that? What can I do to make myself feel better? And so, what I did was, I went on a road trip, just myself and my little dog Scooter. You've met Scooter before. And I took him on a road trip for a couple weeks, and I just did whatever made me feel good in the moment. I just went, and if I saw a sign for the beach, I just took a left and I went to the beach. And if I was going, and friends hit me up like, hey, we're doing whatever. Like if we're coming up through California, I hit up some of my friends that I knew would be along the way, and I met up with them. I trained if I wanted to train. I stop and wine taste and camp out somewhere if I wanted to. Like it was soul searching, basically, is what I'm trying to describe. I did a very deep soul search and took time to get away from any of the toxicity and remove myself from that. So I would recommend, if anybody can remove yourself, as difficult as that can be. I know, because I was in it for 9 years. It took me a long time. There was many failed attempts that I had to exit that relationship. Many failed attempts, many, but don't give up on yourself. You're stronger than you know. And once you get to that point where you have no other choice but to be strong, you'll know. And just make the decisions that are best for yourself. And that's what I did, and that's what I have to do. And now I'm so blessed for it. I am so grateful for the life that I have now. It's given me perspective, because when you have those moments of darkness and you experience those bad situations, those are there to give you the perspective and understand how good it is when you have it good. And I have it great. And I'm so full now. Like my heart is full, my life is full, like my support system is amazing. And I'm genuinely excited to see, like, what can I do? Like Miesha 2.0, I have learned so much. What can I do with all the right things going my way? And that's where I'm at. I'm just in a very good place. I'm very happy, and I can't wait to go fight and go home and squeeze and kiss my babies. It's beautiful. It's gonna be an amazing experience.
That is wonderful. I am thrilled for you. I'm really happy to see that it's all worked out very well for you in your life and your career. I wish you nothing but the best. Welcome back, Miesha. I think everyone's very excited to see you back, and I wish you the best in this training camp and, of course, in the fight in July. Thank you very much. It was great to talk to you once again, especially now as an active fighter once again.
Yes, thank you, Ariel. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.